The smell of blood was something Della had learned to recognize the way other women recognized bread baking. Instantly, with the whole body, with something older than thought. She smelled it now before she saw it, before she had fully understood that the man slumped against the cottonwood tree at the edge of her father's land was not sleeping but dying, that the dark stain spreading through his shirt was not shadow but the slow departure of a life. She was 16 years old, and she had been taught to keep walking. She did not keep walking. His name, she would learn later, was Cole Briggs, and he was 22, and he had taken 3 bullets from men who wanted his horse and his saddlebags and had gotten both. What they had left behind was a body that was not quite finished being a person. A man with copper-brown hair matted to his forehead, with hands that were large and calloused, and currently pressed hard against his own side as if he could hold the blood in by will alone. "Don't," he said when he heard her footstep. His voice was the voice of someone who had been preparing a last sentence and had only managed the first word of it. "Don't what?" Della said. She was already kneeling. Her father's people had medicine that the town doctors did not know, and her mother, who had been Apache and who was 3 years dead, had taught her the uses of things that grew close to the ground. She pressed her own hands over his. The blood was warm. The afternoon was warm. The cottonwood leaves made their dry papery sound in the wind, and somewhere a meadowlark was singing as if none of this were happening at all. "Don't waste your time," he said. "I'll decide what wastes my time," she told him. She worked until the sun moved 2 hands across the sky. She used the cloth of her own underskirt and the contents of the small pouch she carried at her belt, her mother's pouch, smelling still of sage and something sweeter she had never been able to name, a smell that meant hands that knew what they were doing, that meant you will not die from this. Whether the smell was real or memory she had long ago stopped trying to determine. The pouch was her mother's. The knowledge inside her hands was her mother's. That was enough. He did not die. When it was over and she had done everything she could do there in the dirt under the cottonwood, she sat back on her heels and looked at him. He was looking at her with eyes that were gray-green and currently very serious. "You're Del Runningwaiter's daughter," he said. "Yes. The Apache one." "My mother was Apache," she said. "I am both things and neither, depending on who is asking." He was quiet for a moment. The meadowlark had moved on. The cottonwood spoke its dry language above them. "I'm going to owe you my life," he said. It was not gratitude exactly. It was something more like an accounting, a man who kept his ledgers in order recognizing a debt that had just been entered. "You don't owe me anything," Della said. "I do," he shifted, winced, stilled himself. "And I pay what I owe. When I'm back on my feet, I'll find a way." She stood, brushed the dirt from her skirt, looked down at him with the particular expression she had inherited from her father, who was a man who did not waste sentiment. "Make me a promise then," she said, "since you want to give me something. Name it. If I ever need help, real help, not politeness, and I come to you, you come. No questions, no excuses, you come." He looked at her for a long time. The gray-green eyes were clear now, clearer than they had been an hour ago when she'd thought she might lose him. Whatever he was not a man who made promises carelessly. She could see him weighing it, feeling the edges of it. "Agreed," he said. She nodded once. Then she walked home through the late afternoon gold of the prairie, and she did not look back, and she told herself she would never need to collect on a promise made to a stranger under a cottonwood tree on a Wednesday in October. She was wrong about that, but the wrongness of it would take 9 years to arrive. The winter she turned 25 was the winter Harlan Drek decided he wanted her father's land. This was not unusual. Men had been deciding they wanted her father's land for as long as Della could remember. The land was good, the water was reliable, the grass came back thick every spring as if the earth there had made a private decision to be generous. What was unusual about Harlan Drek was the particular flavor of his wanting. Other men had made offers. Harlan Drek arrived with a paper that he said was a deed and a lawyer who said it was legal, and 3 men behind him who said nothing at all, but stood with their hands near their guns in a way that was its own kind of language. Her father was 61 years old and had bad knees and had buried a wife and had fought for this land with the full force of a life. He stood in his own doorway and looked at Harlan Dreck's paper and said nothing. "You've got 2 weeks," Dreck said. He was a wide man, wide in the chest and wide in the jaw, with small pale eyes that reminded Della of certain fish she had seen, eyes that registered everything and felt nothing. "After that we'll be back, and the terms won't be as generous." After they rode away, her father sat down at the kitchen table and put his face in his hands. Della had seen her father angry many times. She had seen him grieving. She had never seen him small, and the smallness of him now, the way his broad shoulders curved inward as if to protect something that was already gone, moved through her chest like a blade. She put her hand on his back, felt his breathing, shallow, careful, the breathing of a man trying not to break. "I'll go to town," she said. "I'll find a lawyer." "Their lawyer wrote that paper," her father said, muffled into his own palms. "Then I'll find a better one." She went to town the next morning on her gray mare, who was named Smoke and who had opinions about everything and expressed them through her ears. The town of Caldwell was 3 hours east, and it smelled, as it always smelled, of horse and sawdust and the particular alkaline dust that came off the street when the wind blew from the south. She went to the land office. She went to the courthouse. She went to 2 lawyers whose offices were above a hardware store and a dry goods respectively. The first lawyer was afraid of Dreck's name. She could see the fear move through him like a cold wind, changing the quality of his attention, making his eyes go sideways. The second lawyer was also afraid, but more honest about it. "Miss Runningwaiter," he said, "I would advise you to take whatever he's offering and be grateful for it." She rode home through the afternoon with the taste of something bitter at the back of her throat that was not quite anger and not quite despair, but was the particular flavor of understanding that certain battles could not be won with the tools she had. She was mucking the mare's stall that evening, working in the smell of hay and horse sweat and the good animal warmth of it, when the memory arrived without warning: the cottonwood tree, the smell of blood, the gray-green eyes, and the careful, weighted promise. Her hands remembered the feel of his before her mind had fully assembled the image, the warmth of his blood, the pressure of keeping something in. She straightened, stood in the stall with the pitchfork in her hands, while the mare turned to look at her with one large brown eye. She had never asked. In 9 years she had never once sent word. She thought about that for a long time. Then she went inside and wrote a letter to the last address she had heard associated with the name Cole Briggs, which was a cattle operation near Wichita, and which might or might not still be where he was, and which was, either way, the only direction she knew to reach in. He arrived on a Thursday, 11 days after she sent the letter, which meant he had left within a day or 2 of receiving it. Della was in the garden when she heard the horse. She stood and turned and saw him coming down the track from the road, taller than she remembered, or perhaps she had simply been 16 and everything had been tall then, with that same copper-brown hair now threaded with something paler at the temples. He rode a dark bay horse that moved with the deliberate quality of an animal that had been places and was not excitable about arriving at new ones. He pulled up at the fence and looked at her. The gray-green eyes were exactly as she remembered. Some things about a person stayed fixed, she had found, the essential ones. "You came," she said. "Told you I would." He swung down from the horse with the slight stiffness of a man who had been riding for several days. "You waited 9 years to ask. I didn't need help before. And now you do." "Now I do," she said. She told him about Dreck over supper, the paper, the lawyer, the 3 quiet men with their hands near their guns. Her father sat at the end of the table and ate with the careful application of a man who was listening, but did not want to be seen to be hopping. Cole listened with his elbows on the table and his eyes on her face in a way that was not rude but very direct, the listening of someone who intended to actually use what he was hearing. "That paper is fraudulent," he said when she finished. "I've seen this before. There's a man in Wichita, federal land agent, honest one, which is a rarer thing than it should be, who handles exactly this. I know him." Her father looked up. "You know a federal land agent?" Della said. "I've moved cattle through a lot of country," Cole said. "You meet people." He looked at her father. "Sir, I'll ride to Wichita, bring him back, and we'll have that paper looked at by someone Drek cannot buy. That's what I can do." Her father was quiet for a moment. The lamp between them moved in some small draft, and the shadows shifted and settled. "Why?" her father said. Not suspicion, just the plain question of a man who had learned that generosity usually had a shape. Cole looked at Della. "Because your daughter saved my life and asked for one thing in return," he said, "and I pay what I owe." That night, after her father had gone to bed, Della sat on the porch in the dark and listened to the prairie making its night sounds, the insects, the distant coyote, the wind in the dry grass that sounded like a river that was not there. Cole came and sat on the step below her, his back against the post, and for a while they did not speak. The air smelled of sage and the particular coolness that came after a warm day, a smell she associated with her mother, with evenings on this same porch, with the sound of her mother singing in a language Della only partly knew, with the feeling of being small and held and safe inside a world that was large and not always kind. "You have her look," Cole said. He was not looking at her, he was looking out at the dark. "My mother's. I met her once, when I came to thank your father after." He paused. "She had a way of looking at things like she could see what they were made of." Della was quiet. The coyote called again, further now, moving away. "People used to say I looked like her," she said. "Before she died they said it like a compliment. After, they said it like a warning." Cole turned then and looked at her over his shoulder, and there was something in his face she could not fully read in the dark, something careful and also very present, as if he was deciding how much of his attention to give her, and had just decided to give all of it. "It's a compliment," he said, "from where I'm sitting." She looked at him for a moment. The prairie sang its dry song around them. Then she looked back out at the dark, and the feeling that moved through her then was not gratitude exactly. It was something more like weather, something that had not been there before and was now simply present, the way a change in wind is simply present, arrived before you noticed it was coming. The trouble came before Cole returned from Wichita. She had known it would. Men like Harlan Drek did not issue warnings because they intended to be patient. The warning was itself the first move. It was meant to produce fear, and fear was meant to produce compliance, and when it did not produce compliance, it produced something else entirely. They came on the fourth night after Cole had ridden east. 4 of them this time, not 3, which told her something about how Drek had recalculated. She heard the horses while she was still awake. She had not been sleeping well, lying in the dark listening to the prairie and thinking about things she was not quite ready to name, and she was at the window before the sound had fully resolved into meaning. 4 horses, no lamps, the particular careful pace of men trying not to be heard. Her father's room was at the back of the house. She went to him first, woke him with a hand on his shoulder and a single word, "Riders." Watched him come awake the way he always came awake, fully and without confusion, which was a thing she had always loved about him. He reached under the mattress without being told. "Back door," she said. "Into the gully. I'll be right behind you." "Della." "Go," she said, "please." She watched him go, moving with the careful speed of a man who knew his own house in the dark. Then she went to the window again. They had dismounted. 2 were moving toward the barn, her mare, her father's old roan, the small flock of chickens whose eggs were most of what they ate through winter. 1 was moving toward the house. The 4th stayed with the horses. The one moving toward the house had a lamp now, unshuttered, and the light swung as he walked and threw moving shadows across the yard. He was not hiding anymore. He was not trying to be quiet. This was the part that came after warnings were ignored, the part that was meant to be seen, to be known, to be carried like a scar. Della took her mother's rifle from above the door. It was old, but she had kept it the way her mother had taught her, oiled, attended, ready to be what it was. The weight of it in her hands was familiar in the oldest way. She had learned to shoot before she had learned to read English. Her mother's hands had covered hers on this same stock. She opened the front door. "Stop," she said. Her voice came out flat and level, without the shaking she could feel in her sternum. This was a thing her body knew how to do, hold steady on the outside while the inside did whatever it needed to do. Her mother had called it the warrior's skin. "You wear it," she had said. "It doesn't wear you." The man with the lamp stopped. He was 10 feet away. She could see his face, young, younger than she'd expected, with the particular blankness of someone who had learned not to feel things while he worked. "Go back," Della said. "Tell Drek the land office in Wichita has that paper. Tell him there is a federal agent riding back with a man who knows what that paper is." This was partly true and partly a bet. Cole had said he would bring the agent, and she had to believe he would. Tell him the next move he makes will be made in front of a judge. The man with the lamp looked at her, looked at the rifle, looked at her again. From the barn she heard something, a shout, a scramble, the indignant sound of smoke taking exception to a stranger in her stall. Then a crash and silence, and then her mare's voice, high and furious, and the sound of 2 men moving fast away from a horse who had decided she was done being handled. It was enough. The balance shifted, she could feel it, the way you feel a change in weather before it arrives, something in the pressure of the air. The young man with the lamp backed up 3 steps. Then he turned and walked to the horses, and the 4 of them rode away into the dark without a word, without looking back, taking their lamplight with them and leaving the yard to its own darkness and the distant outraged commentary of Smoke, who was still talking about what had happened to her in the barn and had strong opinions about it. Della stood in the doorway until the sound of hooves was gone. Then she sat down on the step. Her legs had decided the emergency was over and were expressing their relief, and pressed her forehead against the cool wood of the door frame. "She thought I did that. She thought I did that alone." The prairie sang around her, indifferent and enormous and full of the smell of sage and cooling earth. Somewhere a nighthawk called, the sound dropping and rising, a voice asking no one anything in particular. She breathed. Her mother's rifle was across her knees. Her father was in the gully, waiting. She thought about Cole riding east in the dark toward Wichita. She thought about the way he had looked at her from the porch step, that quality of decided attention. She thought about the feeling that had moved through her like a change in wind, the feeling she had not been ready to name. She named it now quietly in the dark, with no one to hear. Then she stood up, called out to her father that it was safe to come back, went to find her mare, who had things to say and deserved to be heard. The stars were enormous above the prairie, the way they always were, the way they had been above this land before she was born and would be after, cold and generous and indifferent to everything except the fact of shining, which they did without ceasing, which was its own kind of promise.